We are 5 months away from Maine's primary, where 8 candidates will be competing for a chance to unseat Republican incumbent Susan Collins. Among those candidates is former Google executive Ross LaJeunesse. LaJeunesse says he left the company in April because of Google's abuse of power and mistreatment of employees. The Democratic candidate is looking to unseat the state's incumbent Republican Senator Susan Collins, who he says is, quote, out of touch with voters. Ross LaJeunesse joins us now from Portland, Maine. Good to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So in a blog post you wrote discussing your experiences with Google, you say that the company has strayed away from its motto, don't be evil. What do you attribute this change to culture?
Look, I think the way to look at this story and my experience is really to recognize that it's bigger than me, and it's actually bigger than Google. This is about corruption, it's about greed, and it's about abuse of power that's infected many American corporations, the same thing that's infected Washington, which is why I'm running against Susan Collins.
You say that just when they needed to double down on a commitment to human rights, it decided instead to chase bigger profits and an even higher stock price. When did you notice this change at Google?
There wasn't one singular moment, but certainly when I realized that we were, not we, but certain executives were trying to push back into China with a censored search result. That was a moment of clarity for me. I was the executive charged with executing our 2010 decision to stop censoring search results in China, which was the right thing to do, which is the right thing to do for human rights and for corporate responsibility. So when that decision was about to be reversed, certainly a moment when I knew that I was no longer working at the same company that I had started working at years before.
You also wrote about a few specific instances in which you experienced senior colleagues engaging in racist and sexist incidents. Tell me more about that.
Absolutely. I saw a pattern of behavior, senior colleagues being very aggressive and abusive toward younger women on their teams. There was also a really problematic diversity, in quotes, exercise, where folks were separated by their identity and then asked to shout out stereotypes into a room. And when I spoke up about each of these incidences, as was my responsibility to do as a senior person at the company, I was accidentally CC'd on an email with HR executives saying that they should do some digging into me instead. They saw me as a problem for speaking up, doing the right thing, rather than seeing that diversity exercise as the problem. Again, another moment in my career when I knew I was no longer at the same place I had joined.
Meanwhile, you are one of 8 candidates running in this primary election, including the state's House Speaker, Sarah Gideon. What are you doing to stand out from her and some of the other candidates?
I'm running because of my own life experience. I grew up in a very hardworking family. We didn't have a lot of resources in Maine when I was a kid. We struggled. We almost lost our home. And my mother cleaned the homes of wealthy families in a nearby town. That's why I really talk about there being 2 Maines. The Maine that you see on vacation during the summer, and then the Maine that I grew up in. And that Maine, where I grew up, is falling farther and farther behind. We're 49th in the country in terms of economic growth. We still don't have high-speed internet or even mobile phone reception in huge parts of the state. And that really holds back our economy, and it holds back our students. We have so many issues that we need to address in Maine to give working Maine families a fair shot. And I know what that feels like, and that's why I'm running for Senate, because Susan Collins has done nothing to help this state. The only thing she's done in the past 2 years is vote for a slate of right-wing judges that put my own marriage, I'm an openly gay man, put my own marriage at risk and threaten the reproductive health choices of women all across the country. And then the second thing she's done is she's voted for a $1.5 trillion tax cut that's benefited the richest Americans and corporations. Meanwhile, families like the one that I grew up in Maine are struggling to put food on the table and make ends meet. And that is corruption, that is greed, it's abuse of power, and that's why I'm running against her. She does not deserve to represent Maine in the Senate anymore.
So, Ross, you say that she's voted for a right-wing agenda, to use your words. But there are a lot of people who look at Senator Collins and say, well, she's a moderate Republican. She's not an extreme right-wing Republican. So why would you say that her positions are extreme?
Susan Collins is not a moderate. She comes back to the state and makes that claim. But just looking at the judges that she has confirmed to the bench, and I'm not just talking about Brett Kavanaugh, whom I believe is unfit to wear the robes of a Supreme Court justice. She has confirmed a number of judges which the ABA, the American Bar Association, has deemed unfit to be a federal judge. She voted for a $1.5 trillion tax cut, like I said, that does not benefit working Maine families. The beneficiaries of that tax cut are the corporations that fill her campaign coffers. That's corruption. That's forgetting who sent you to Washington in the first place. She has been there for 24 years. It's time for her to go.
And Ross, I want to ask you about Maine's new voting process, ranked choice voting, in which voters rank their choices for a candidate instead of just choosing one. It's the first time this will be used in a presidential election. How do you think that this will affect the election?
Well, I hope and think that ranked choice voting will ensure that we talk about the issues that matter to Maine voters. That's certainly what I'm planning on doing. Hopefully it will cut down on the amount of attack ads and the amount of mud thrown at each other. I mean, I'm in this race to talk about the issues that matter to Maine families. I'm always going to run a campaign that talks about my qualifications, my ideas for building one Maine, where it doesn't matter where you grow up, you get the same opportunities and the same chance at success. And it doesn't matter if you grew up in a wealthy town on the coast or if you grow up somewhere else in the middle of the state. But I hope that ranked choice voting makes sure that all of us as candidates put forward ideas about how to address many of the problems that we need to fix to make sure Maine and the country get back on track. We desperately need to do that. So that's my view of ranked choice voting.
And finally, let me ask you about how you're raising money, because as we know in America, it costs a lot of money to run for elective office. On your website, you say that being a senator from Maine means putting your state ahead of insider politics, including contributions from corporations and PACs. So how are you raising money?
Absolutely right. I'm going to win this race the same way that every candidate has won any race. I'm traveling up and down the state. I'm meeting with voters in every town, everywhere I can. I'm listening to them, which is something that Susan Collins has stopped doing a long time ago. I'm listening to their concerns. I'm sharing my ideas, and I'm confident I'm going to have the message and I'm going to have the resources I need to win. That's the way that anyone wins a campaign, a race. Do the hard work, and that's what I'm doing.
All right. And sir, just we can let our viewers know, we did receive a statement from Google, and I'm just going to read it for our viewers. It says, quote, "We have an unwavering commitment to supporting human rights organizations and efforts. Ross was offered a new position at the exact same level in compensation, which he declined to accept. We wish Ross all the best with his political ambitions."
That's exactly right. They did offer me, when I complained about these issues, they tried to get rid of me. And when I fought back, they did offer me a very cushy job at the same salary, but without the ability to work on human rights issues, without the ability to speak up for the right thing. And that's when I knew I'm not going to do what many other executives have done, which is I could have put my head down, I could have let them buy my silence, and I could have shut my mouth. But that's not the way I was raised. I was raised to speak the truth. I was raised to do the right thing. And I decided at that moment that Google was no longer a place where I could do that. And I walked out the door. That's the type of person I am. That's the type of senator I'm going to be. And that's why I think Mainers should vote for me. rossformaine.com. I'm looking forward to meeting as many Maine voters as possible during the next 6 months, and I'm looking forward to representing them in the U.S. Senate.
All right. Ross LaJeunesse, thank you, sir. We wish you luck.
Thank you so much.